one more time.
And now, by request from Bay Ridge, Larry Underwood and Baby, Can You Dig Your Man? Well, baby, can you?
I know you got the hurt drop right there in your eyes, but here I am, baby, on my knees to apologize. There's nothing I won't do for the two of us to make a stand. Baby, can you dig your man? He's a righteous man. Tell me, baby, can you dig your
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. This is your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude. You're right. Your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your pharaoh of physical media, and your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, coming at you, robcasting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This would be Robservations episode number 578. The show about something. It's certainly about something today, yo. So last night, I went to bed relatively early, and when I say relatively early, that means midnight for me. I went to bed at midnight, and what did I do? I watched The Expanse, episodes 2 and 3. I watched Star Trek Discovery. I don't even know what name of the episode. It's Terra Firma, Part 2, which I watched. And I waited till last to watch The Stand. That's right. One of my most eagerly awaited motion picture events of it was 1978, but of 2020. It was one of my most eagerly awaited events of 1994, but this year, 2020, again, it was one of my most eagerly awaited events. I was so excited. I've told you about Cast the Stand. I've told you about my history with the franchise, with the books. The books, because I read the Signet paperback like 5 times. Then I read the unexpurgated version. I actually got that in 1990. I was working at Warner Brothers, and I got called into work on a Saturday. There was I think it was a European shoot, and they needed somebody in our production office because we were, after all, the physical production office. And if there was a problem, somebody had to be there to answer phones. And I actually volunteered. It was a paid job, paid Saturday, but I volunteered because I had the new version of The Stand, and I figured no one's going to call. They didn't, and I got to sit at the studio for 8 hours and read The Stand. So it was on, and I waited. I watched it from, I watched it 3 o'clock. When was it over? 4 o'clock. I watched it till almost the sun came up, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. But I wanted to start by reading an article. We've been talking a lot about Warner Brothers and where Warner Brothers is at and what's gone on. And I read an interesting article that I wanted to share with you here. It was on Deadline, and it's an interview with a man named Bill Mechanic, who he was, if you ever worked in Hollywood, well, he still is. Bill Mechanic was one of the most level-headed guys in the business, very great reputation, and he weighed in on the situation at Warner Brothers. And Michael Fleming published this article yesterday on Deadline, and I didn't see it. I would have read it yesterday, but I wanted to share it with you because I thought it was worth reading. And Michael Fleming put this up yesterday at 2 in the afternoon, and his editor's note is, as chairman CEO of Fox Filmed Entertainment in the era of Titanic, X-Men, Independence Day, and Braveheart, and producer of the Oscars and Oscar-nominated films like Hacksaw Ridge and Coraline, Bill Mechanic has been part of the fabric of the film industry his whole career. He thought he'd seen every iteration and change in a business striving to stay relevant in the digital age. The surprise move by Warner Media to drop its entire 2021 film slate on HBO Max was a new one on him, and one he thinks can do lasting damage to the traditions of a billion-dollar industry. Here he explains why. So I figured, why not share this Definitely worth reading. So here's what Bill Mechanic has to say. We are living in an upside-down world. For decades, Warner Brothers has been the most talent-friendly studio, catering to the needs of stars, directors, and even producers. But in one fell swoop, after being swallowed by AT&T and inserting a management team of outsiders, Warner Brothers became the antithesis. Chris Nolan declared that he and others went to bed thinking they were working for the greatest studio and woke up to find out they were working for the worst streaming service. And Denis Villeneuve wrote that Warner Brothers went from being a legacy home for filmmakers to a new era of complete disregard. There is absolutely no love for cinema, nor for the audience here. When you're running a studio, the job is to make movies you think can make money. But you must also always keep in mind that it is impossible to reach that goal without the best talent. Notifying your most important filmmakers via the press that you're dumping their films onto a streaming site day and date with theatrical as opposed to the traditional and promised, very important, promised exclusive theatrical release is like Trump firing people by tweet. Essentially, it's pure arrogance that people don't matter to you. It is the quickest path to failure. I could not agree more with Mr. Mechanic here. Working in the film business is, of course, we're making product. Make no mistake, it ain't show friends, it's show business, and everybody gets into it to make money. People love movies, so they hope that they can make a go of it as a business and also enjoy themselves at the same time. Little do they know. But anyway, the most important thing is the relationships that you have with people. In the entertainment business, people always say it's not what you know, it's who you know. Actually, it's a combination of both. But the reason that people have longevity in the entertainment business is because other people like working with them. And that is one of the most important things with any, it's a very social business. And from the gatekeepers who decide which movies to get made to the people that are actually making the movies, the people, the production people that are on the ground, in the trenches, boots on the ground, making it all happen, to the people in post-production, whether it's your editor, whether it's your sound team. It's all about interacting with other people, other talented people that can realize the vision of the producers and the director and the cinematographer, all the people who put their blood, sweat, and tears and desire to make a movie into it. You have hundreds, if not thousands of people that are all working on the same project. And one of the most important things is to have good relationships with those people. Because what you want, I think, more than anything else when you're working in Hollywood, is you want people to want to work hard for you. And they know you're going to do right by them, and how you do right by them is you pay them what they're worth. You know, you don't nickel and dime people for favors. You make deals with, obviously, I talk a good game, and I've only worked really in the independent arena. But I've tried to pay people what they're worth when I have the money to pay them, that is. But the idea is you want to make sure that people are appreciated. It is a very social business. And the one thing that you have to have is trust. When you work on a project, it's like, okay, we're embarking on a year journey, a 2-year journey, sometimes a journey that's going to last even longer. And you have to trust that the people that you're in business with are going to go the distance with you. That you're not going to be 6 months or a year into a project and someone's going to turn on you and say, "Oh, sorry," and move on. Or they're going to do exactly what Warner Brothers did to filmmakers that in some cases are still working on their movies. So, as when Bill Mechanic says, essentially it's pure arrogance that people don't matter to you. It's the quickest path to failure. Absolutely, 100% right. The arrogance is not surprising. In their primary business, AT&T hasn't had to manage talent. Telephones are meant to be spoken into, not answer back with a voice of their own. You tell Siri what to do, not have her tell you what she wants. She's an AI servant. Much harder to do that with Chris Nolan, Patty Jenkins, or Denis Villeneuve, with good reason. They weren't hired to take orders. Jason Kilar, or I don't know if it's Keelar, I say Keelar because it's a Star Trek thing, but Jason Kilar claims that they're currently soothing over the ruffled feathers. My guess, he doesn't even know what that means. Nor does his tech background lead him to really care. He said that they made the decision to dump their entire slate of films to their streaming service because it's what the fans want. Let's be clear here. It has nothing to do with the fans or the talent or the pandemic, which, yes, does provide a short-term excuse. It has to do with an unsuccessful launch of HBO Max, which is not a failure by any means, though compared to the subscription levels of Netflix or Disney, it has to be viewed thus far as an also-ran. With the earlier entry into entertainment with DirecTV also a laggard, all AT&T cares about is the impact on their stock. They need to prove the billions they spent acquiring DirecTV and Warner Brothers will deliver transformative profits. Film fans, or maybe called by their real name, film buffs, aren't clamoring for movies via streaming. Fans go to theaters to see them with other moviegoers to get the fullest impact of both the big screen and their fellow audiences. Sometimes good and sometimes bad. Yeah, it doesn't matter as much when the film isn't good, and many films can play better alone than with a crowd. Those films are certainly great at home via streaming, cable, or whatever, but for a film buff, seeing a movie with others is simply not replaceable. Warner Media and others can argue day and date allows people who still go to see movies in theaters. In truth, they are treating anyone who does like they're an idiot, paying $15 to $20 for the privilege instead of staying home and seeing a month's worth of whatever for the same price, regardless of the number of people who join in. This isn't to serve filmgoers, it's to magnify the value of their service. Theatrical release increases perceived value for subsequent markets like streaming, while streaming first destroys the perceived value. What Mechanic is saying here is that, and I will attest to this as a indie filmmaker who for 30 years has worked on projects that are desperate to be seen in theaters. That is the goal. You're making a piece, as I've said before, movies are the collision of art and commerce. There are some people that like the commerce nature of it. You know, they come in, they figured out a way to make the great deals. They get paid. They get their name on a lot of prestigious projects, sometimes not, but they've made the deal, so they've already been paid because it's show business, not show friends, and that's good. And those are the people that make the movies happen. But then again, you know, the people, the artisans, nobody, and I will tell you this, nobody gets involved in the artistic side of filmmaking. If you want to be a director or a writer or a cinematographer or whatever, nobody gets involved to phone it in. I mean, you get beaten down and eventually it doesn't matter, but everybody is hoping that what they're making is worthy, is worthwhile, is something people are going to cherish and talk about in 50, if not 100 years. Everybody does that. And when you're working at the level of directors like Patty Jenkins, Denis Villeneuve, or, of course, Christopher Nolan, that's why you're in the business in the first place. That's what you're doing. You're making movies to be seen in theaters by large amounts of people. And what Mechanic is saying is, if a film is great in the theater, if it makes its name there, it solidifies its reputation forever. And that reputation is then what drives the ancillary markets. That means you get more, let's say you make a big independent movie, and your independent movie does really well in theaters, and it makes a name for itself. That means its home video deals can be richer. That means its cable deals can be richer. I mean, you want that theatrical, because that's the way of the business. Now, do I think in 50, well, maybe not even 50, in 10 years that's going to change? I do. But right now, we're in a big transitional moment where you can't, this is not about pulling a Band-Aid off and making people figure out like, hey, AT&T doesn't care about the theatrical experience. And by the way, lest we not forget, they don't. AT&T doesn't give a fuck about theatrical. They don't. They don't care. Why don't they care? Because it has nothing to do with them. Do they want to make the money? Sure. But remember, they're not going to make that much money, even off $1 billion grosser, not to cover their $150 billion in debt. I think it would go a long way. Like a movie like Tenet, remember, Tenet can make, well, it didn't. Tenet was a big failure. But let's say another movie that came out, I don't know, Wonder Woman 84 could have made, let's just say, $1 billion at the box office. AT&T's not going to get $1 billion at the box office. They're not even going to get $500 million. They'll get probably, after somebody takes their cut, $400 million. You pay for the movie, you pay the interest, you pay the overhead in the studio, whatever chunks you're going to take out, and how much you really left with in profit. 50 million, 100 million if you're lucky. I mean, that's not that much money, and 50 and 100 million bucks on the kind of spend that they're making, they'd much rather have that money come out of subscribers that grow. But then again, there's only so many people that are going to subscribe to your service anyway. So what are you gonna wind up with? I mean, look at Disney's growth. They're talking about they're rolling up on 90 million subscribers in a year. 90 million subscribers, and as we've talked about with their rates, I mean, they're going to go up, but 90 million, that's like, they're guaranteed about $500 million every month. Now, $500 million every month, if you look at what Disney made last year, $500 million, you can make, what, $6 billion on your streaming service, but you get that up to 200 million subscribers. I mean, that's not bad, and that also gives you stable income that you can look at, and you can go, okay, we're going to take in, like, let's say they wind up, let's say Disney gets into a position where they're going to eventually make over $18 million or $18 billion a month. Let's say they eventually get to that level. 18 billion a month. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. I don't know if they can get to 18 billion a month, because if you've got 96, no, not 18 million. Let's make it. That's way too much. My numbers are wrong. Let's call it 2 billion a month. That's the number. 2 billion a month. So you've got $24 billion coming in per year. That's the kind of that's where you want to be, because you're going to have to pay for your productions, you're going to have to pay for your overhead and all that. So if you look at it, they're talking about spending 14 to 16 billion in production by 2024. That's what they're deciding. Now, let's say you make 24 billion a year. If you're going to spend, let's, for the sake of argument, just say they're going to spend 14 billion. So you've got 10 billion remaining. You have to pay for your overhead, you got to pay all your salaries and whatever. But let's say you come down and eventually, I don't know, of that number, $4 billion in profit from your entertainment division. That doesn't include parks, just from movies. An assured $4 billion in profit is a nice, healthy number for a movie studio. And that's what streaming can bring you. You don't have to worry about marketing costs and all that. So that's what they're looking to do. Economically, he goes on, economically, the problem for all of us who make movies is that the value they are enhancing, the value of their service, not our movie, is exclusionary. We share when we make a successful movie, but there's not an iota coming back to us if we make their service successful. It's a lose-lose for talent. This is very important. I am not being anti-home screen in any way, but my prejudice is that I love to go to the movies. I remember growing up and watching The Wizard of Oz on my television at home every Thanksgiving and being both awed by the majesty of the story, the music, and the performances. But when I went to film school and saw the film with a theater full of kids and their parents, I saw a movie I'd never seen before. Everything came to life in a way with those kids that transported me back to my past in my living room and into a fantasy world of dreams and nightmares in a new and, yes, far more heightened way. But this really isn't about what the film experience is. Anyone can do as they like, and neither is mutually exclusive. I used to say we were making films for the choir, the rabid fans, and it was only when we stumbled onto something like Titanic that people who never went to the movies came out to see what everyone was talking about. The box office on that film was often mistakenly attributed to repeaters, but the truth was it broke through because it not only had repeaters, but attracted people who hadn't been to a theater in years. Left to its natural evolution, the industry will find a happy medium of serving the fans in theaters and the more casual or older and perhaps busier film lovers at home. Theaters don't have to go away to allow streaming to continue on its growth spirals. That's why this is about pure economics, not fandom. It's also not about how to make the most money, since, as you can hear from the Wall Street analysts, there is no way that bypassing or undercutting theatrical produces the best results. I believe there are 47 movies to gross at least $1 billion. Titanic may have broken a barrier, but it's been exceeded every year since, repeatedly, by other films. A simple truth. Releasing movies first in theatrical establishes value. Releasing movies first in streaming destroys value. There is a reason that Disney right now leading the way, both in theatrical box office share and in propelling its streaming service, isn't turning their back on Marvel or Pixar or Lucasfilm movies in theaters. Doing so would cost Disney billions of dollars in profit from those labels, and I would imagine would lose them filmmakers like Kevin Feige and all the other fantastic directors and animators on their other labels. When David Fincher decides to make Mank at Netflix, that's a conscious decision on his part, in full cooperation with Netflix, in how and where it's distributed. There are no surprises sprung on him. He has said it was not only the best way to make the film, but probably the only way. I can tell you from experience that the middle-level budget movies are the ones that are the most difficult to find financing for theatrical release, not because audiences have gone away, but because financiers have shied away. My argument is not about where something plays, but which financier you can choose to work with and whether their word matters, whether your contract matters. AT&T Time Warner Media's decision to bypass theatrical without even discussing or explaining their intent with filmmakers who have devoted not only years of their lives, but pieces of themselves creatively, is the bottom of the slippery slope we've been on for decades. After the studios, originally funded by owner-operators, were sold to conglomerates who sold to end users, hardware companies, cable companies, etc., the feel and concern for movies evaporated along with those sales. AT&T thinks that filling the pipes with content is the same as dealing with cell towers or phone manufacturers. They deal in commodities and not art. Even call it commercial art if you want. Rupert Murdoch blew up the legacy of Fox without so much as a thought. He got his Fox News. Movies were an unpredictable and risky nuisance. Besides, movie people were spoiled, particularly the artists and the executives. The difference between Fincher choosing to make his picture at Netflix and the Warner Brothers filmmakers finding out via the internet that the films they made for theatrical release were being tossed aside to help promote a streaming service is all the difference in the world. Legal, cultural, economic, collaborative. In all of this mess, Warner Media's decision has made one thing clear. There is a void in leadership within the motion picture industry. The studios are the most constant financiers of movies, the only ones who make films as their sole reason to exist. So where is not just the cry of outrage, but also the rational game plan for how the business could and should run? I like that Richard Lovett and Patrick Weitzel have stood up and taken a position for the talent they represent. I love that Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, Patty Jenkins, Judd Apatow, and others are even more forceful in taking up a leadership role in opposing Warner Media's decision. Patty Jenkins said it best when she asked why some studio doesn't step forward and provide all this great talent a home they can trust. She shouldn't have to ask, and yet not a single studio has stood up to protest this attack on their very existence. It's strange to hear only silence from those who should be fighting for the business they run. The pandemic has all but destroyed so many businesses, and the movie theaters are among the hardest hit. They should be nurtured, not destroyed. Casting them aside like they did something to earn their demise is close to criminal, especially when the vaccine should at least let us start returning to some sense of normal by mid-year. It's one thing to let things play out, let consumers decide they don't want to go to see the Lakers or see Dune and would rather watch at home. Deciding for them is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The people who made this decision undoubtedly don't care about movies or the talent behind them, so it's not a surprise they acted like no one would care. This wasn't about the fans, it was about them. All the king's horses and all the king's men aren't going to put our world back together again. There are so many pieces that are broken, and maybe the ones we're discussing in Hollywood don't rise to the level of those in Washington, though I'd argue they affect many of us on a deep level. The theatrical window proven functionality has been overturned, and the best we can hope for is that a smarter evolution occurs with all voices heard. I think, judging on what we've been discussing on this show lately, it was important to read Mr. Mechanic's letter, and I'm glad he wrote it. Now, one of the things I was telling you guys a couple days ago about the insider, the person that I talked to, sort of my industry oracle, the thing that he said resonated with me, and I honestly can't stop thinking about it, that everyone knows that streaming services are the future of this industry. Forget theatrical. That's a different subject. But streaming services are the future. And for filmmakers, when Bill Mechanic was talking about David Fincher making Mank, David Fincher knows, he's worked with Netflix ever since House of Cards, Mindhunter. He knows when he's dealing with Netflix, it's like, okay, David, how much money do you need? Here's the money you need. Here's when we want it. And he knows that Netflix is going to play straight with him. There isn't any of this weird, they want his movie, they're going to let him make his movie, and that's why talent is attracted to places like Netflix, and I would imagine all the streamers, Apple, Disney, Peacock, whoever jumps into the fray, if they have the kind of money that Netflix has or Disney Plus has, filmmakers know that when you hire them to make a film, you get to make that film. You're not going to have meddlesome executives or executives that turn around and tell you as you work tirelessly that, nope, the way we're going to distribute your movie has changed because Netflix's whole raison d'etre is to be a distributor. That's what they're going to do. They're going to do exactly what they told you. Now, when Warner Media does what they did, that's problematic. Now, we know that the future of the film business is going to be streaming. That's where there's going to be more stability in that than anywhere else. Having a guaranteed income is something any studio wants, and of course, a streaming service brings that with it, with the idea of subscriber base. But as my industry insider told me, that it was Toby Emmerich who came up with the idea of this day and date theatrical and streaming day and date thing, because he himself knows that movie studios are not going to be what they are in 10 years, what they are now, and he wanted to solidify his power base by ingratiating himself to the people at AT&T, and he wants to run the Warner Street HBO Max. And can I say this? I've said this before. I think it was a huge tactical blunder for HBO, for Warner Media, to call their streaming service HBO Max. I know they were trying to tread on the long reputation that's been well established of HBO, but there's so much brand confusion in that marketplace. HBO Go, HBO Now, HBO Whenever, HBO Sex and the City, HBO Dream On. There's so many different iterations of HBO, and I don't think HBO really says, and I think that's really why it had a lackluster debut, is because people thought, well, I already have HBO. They didn't really know, and people who didn't have HBO were like, there's nothing on it I want. So the fact that they called it HBO Max, I think, hurt it, because even HBO subscribers that love HBO are like, do I have to get new HBO? Like, what is it? So I think that was really problematic. If they called it something else, like Warner Brothers Plus, but they didn't have to do that. But Warner Brothers has a much more storied and more ingrained name, I think, in our pop culture history than HBO does. HBO will always come along with the baggage of their rival Showtime, and everybody has, I think, HBO touchstones in their lives. But I think that harmed their launch. I really do. I think they shouldn't have done that. But that's neither here nor there. But anyway, I thought Bill Mechanic's words were good, worth sharing. But let's get to what I've been thinking about since last night. I think I'll start this with the Hollywood Reporter review of The Stand. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's things in it that really speak to me. So I'm just going to read what they say. The bottom line for them says, drains the source material of all momentum. Oh, do I wholeheartedly agree with that. On the page, by the way, let's see who wrote this. Who wrote this? Daniel Feinberg wrote this. On the page, Stephen King's 1978 The Stand is a study in horrifying momentum. It's so propulsive that King was able to add hundreds of pages 12 years after its original publication without sacrificing the clarity of a narrative that keeps moving from one climax, a burgeoning plague, humanity's mobilization in Boulder, the final stand, to another. It's generally clear, and it's always churning along. CBS All Access's new adaptation of The Stand is a car on cinder blocks. It looks great. If you glance under the hood, you can see all the work that's been done on the engine. But no matter how ready it seems to peel out onto the road, it isn't going anywhere. Very rarely is the Benjamin Cavell-steered adaptation with Josh Boone directing the pilot actively bad, but it's very frustrating. Now, I won't read more of that, but I have to say that encapsulates my entire problem with this miniseries. Straight up, it's beautifully made. As far as I can tell right now, I've liked most of the acting that I've seen. But one of the things about this book, and I've often said it's maybe my favorite book of all time, not because is it the best book ever written? Well, no, but I have to say that when I read it, it was probably the most wildly entertaining book that I've ever read. It defines the idea of a page turner. I defy anyone. Now, this is not necessarily true of the unexpurgated version, but the 823 page version or 27 page version that I had read, the original release of it, the 78 release of it, you can't pick it up and start reading the first chapter without being hooked. And as someone was pointing out on my Twitter today, as a matter of fact, I should call it up because this person had a lot of great ideas. I didn't even think about this. I was talking about doing this before, but they had a lot of great points because they were clearly a fan of the book. Now let me see if I can get down and find what he was saying. Because I thought he had a lot of good points to make. So I'm looking, and I'll see if I can find him, but maybe not. But that was the thing. It's the forward momentum. It was the propulsive nature of the story. And because it has such a sprawling narrative, you're going all over the country, whether you're in Braintree, Texas, or you're in the underground lab, or you're in New York City, or later in Colorado or Las Vegas. I mean, these were the things that you're skipping around and you're meeting all these people, but there was this propulsive forward momentum. And I think the thing that you notice, especially if you're a fan of the book or a fan of the miniseries, one of the things that you immediately notice is the structure. Now, I had been told by somebody close to the production that they were going to rely on a flashback structure, which I, to be honest, thought when I heard that, I was dubious. I'm like, flashback structure, so you're going to go, each episode's going to be about certain people, and you're going to go back and forth, and it robs the story of the journey. You know, you're now, because once you know that a pandemic has destroyed the world, as they illustrate in the first, you're done. You don't need to keep going back and seeing that happen over and over and over again to see how everybody was. I can't find the person I wanted to read his tweets, but they had a lot of really interesting things to say, and I wish I could because they had. Oh, never mind. I found him. Let's see if I can find the tweets that he sent me. If he was very loquacious on Twitter. I'm looking for what he has to say, and I guess I can't find them, but maybe I'll just go back to what he was saying. He wrote, this thread could have easily been, his name is Richard Lackey, and he's on Twitter. He said, this thread could easily have been 100 tweets about the beginning of The Stand, especially the extended version. King describing the contents of a room and why something innocuous meant something to the character, only to then kill them in 3 pages, is just amazing to me. Another reason I fell in love with King was his use of real-world lyrics to set the tone or a scene or a chapter in a book. He does this a lot, and as a huge music nerd, it really won me over. That's true of The Stand, too. And like Mick Garris used this in the original miniseries, the Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper. And when the disease is unleashed, when you see Campion and his family take off, the opening credits of the original miniseries are over all the dead bodies in the research facility where Captain Trips was created, dying. And it was a great way to start the miniseries. Now, do I think the miniseries should have started that way? Well, I mean, one of the interesting things about the story of the book was once it gets rolling, you're meeting people and they're all on a journey, and you're following that journey. and it makes it, from a narrative standpoint, really, really compelling. And the way they've structured the Stand now, you're constantly going back and forth and back and forth, and it doesn't have that narrative thrust anymore because you're basically you're running to stand still. And that was the thing that struck me at first. The opening thing in the miniseries is Whoopi Goldberg as Mother Abigail giving you these voiceovers. And the funny thing about that is we don't even know who Mother Abigail is, and part of that journey is to find out, like, who is this person, and are we going to get there? So it sets up this idea that there's Mother Abigail that's touching the lives of these people, and what's going to happen when we get there? Well, with the flashback structure, it opens already in Colorado. So the entire journey of getting there you're already there. And then when you're going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, it just becomes, you're like, why even bother doing that? And the book is structured, the first third of the book, when you're watching civilization fall and you're following the everyman, the character. James Marsden I thought was quite good as Stu Redman. But one of the interesting things in the book and in the original miniseries is following what happens to him from the outbreak and as you're moving along. And you're intercutting people, like it takes 6 episodes for you to finally get everybody together. And it was interesting to watch people pick each other up on the road to Colorado, and then the road, well, not everybody, there's 4 people on the road to Vegas. But you're watching this, and I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, the joy of following the narrative, the Stand's narrative. And when I say joy, yes, I know the world is collapsing, but it was so compelling and so interesting. And even odder is that one of the more distasteful characters of the book, a person you love to hate, is who they spent the majority of the first episode with. And you're juxtaposing that character with James Marsden's character, and you see a lot more of this vile character than you see of Stu Redman, who's basically, if the book has a hero, he is kind of the hero of that book. And it just doesn't work. I was watching and I feel, why am I not engrossed in this? Why? And just when I was really starting to get engrossed, they would whip you back to somewhere else. And it looked to me, and I don't know if this is true, but as an editor myself, it looked to me like this way of telling the story, they came up with it after the fact. It looked to me like this was something that they came up with in editorial, because what a flashback structure allows you to do is you can jump over a lot of things. It allows you, just the sheer fact of using that structure, any narrative holes that you might have had in what you originally shot can be plugged with that flashback structure. And it looked to me like what I was watching, and I say, what tipped me off of that? There was not a lot of establishing shots when you went in and out of those flashbacks, when normally there kind of would be. You'd set the scene so you know exactly where you are. The flashbacks were pretty, it was odd. And that just bothered me from a filmmaking perspective. But because of that, you never really built up any narrative thrust to the story, because you didn't get to journey with the characters. You've got to make people care about the characters before you jump away from them or go to somebody else or go back into their past. And I felt that it didn't work that way. It didn't work that well. And I wondered, as this review pointed out, the structure of The Stand is one of the things. I mean, everyone talks about how the ending is a little disappointing, and it is. But it was the very structure of the story that makes it so compelling in the first place. That's how the first miniseries worked, and King wrote that first miniseries. And I thought that it was really interesting. And I don't understand the choice. And it was very strange. And also, here's something from the Hollywood Reporter review that I thought was spot on. Occupying, well, let's say, and how about the flu? and how it plays in our COVID-19 infused reality? The answer is that it rarely feels overly connected to anything in the real world, and I'll leave it for you to decide if that's a good thing or a bad thing. With the exception of one visceral early scene in a New York City emergency room, the pandemic here has more in common with whatever happened to civilization on The Walking Dead than anything experienced in real life in the past 10 months. As it was written and filmed before the pandemic, one can easily understand why Cavell and company didn't want to steer into our all-too-pleasant year. Yet it's not hard to feel that in the story designed as a broad allegory, the opportunity for some sort of grounded resonance has been lost and replaced by almost nothing. The reviewer says, I'll watch the last 3 episodes, especially to see the new coda written by King himself, but too much of this new attempt to tackle The Stand is full of coughing and mucus, signifying nothing. And from what I've seen, and admittedly it's only the first episode, it's only the first hour, but the first hour of The Stand to me is crucial. It's crucial. And the intercutting and the way you'd meet characters and things and spending an inordinate amount of time with Harold Lauder was a very, to me, strange choice that I just don't think worked. And I wonder if you don't know what The Stand is. I was watching this and I'm thinking, if you haven't read the book or don't know the story, would you follow this? Because when they set up the flashback scenes or there's fantasy sequences when people are meeting Mother Abigail. When you're meeting Mother Abigail, you're like, okay, this is Whoopi Goldberg, but it doesn't do a very good job establishing the idea that these characters are being influenced. I mean, what do these dreams mean? And I think that for not Stand aficionados, but people who've watched this show for the first time or are hearing the story for the first time, I just feel it's not done in a very compelling way. Whereas the way it unfolded in the book, which is also how it unfolded in the original miniseries in '94, and lest we forget, the '94 miniseries is, I don't necessarily think it's as well cast as it should be. The actors seem to be a lot better in this miniseries, but there's a lot of great actors in the original The Stand. But the structure worked, and the fall of civilization is one of the things that make the story interesting. And I feel that this jumping around structure really, really hurt it. And I think that it was not, I don't think it was written that way. Maybe it was. Maybe I'm totally off base. I don't know. There's a person I want to ask, the person who told me that it was the flashback structure in the first place. But I can't imagine it would be, because it doesn't work. It's strangely, dramatically inert. And that was the thing that I was most surprised by, because when the flu starts to spread in the book and in the original miniseries, it's terrifying. It's terrifying, but this time you don't feel it. You don't feel that, like when watching the military roll into trucks into small towns, when you see all the small townspeople being rounded up, there's images from The Stand that are indelible, that you don't forget, and a lot of that was just missing. And I found it strange that something like that could happen. Again, I'm going to watch the whole thing. It's a handsome miniseries. It looks good, but the structure, I always find it strange when a great book that people love is adapted and they dispense with one of the key points that made the book so great, which is the structure, of which all of it's gone. And it just seems odd to me, especially because at the end, they give away that 2 characters that we've been following in this flashback structure, suddenly you see these 2 characters, they're in Colorado, and they're together as a couple. And you're like, wait, what? And they completely they tell you that, oh, these 2 characters wind up together. And I'm sure we'll flash back to when they met or whatever, but you give away things that are part of the longer narrative. And when you do it, it was so. This is one of the reasons I believe that this structure was matter of fact, because when you see them, it's abrupt. You're like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, wow, they're together. I can't believe, or I can't imagine that that's how this miniseries was originally scripted. It just seems so strange that they went in that direction. But if it was done after the fact, if they did this in the edit bay because for some reason it wasn't working the way they wanted it to, which I think is probably the case, that they went and they did this structure. because it feels like something that was created later. But I don't know. I'll be very curious to hear what all of you think of The Stand. It was not what I'd hoped, and I found it very disappointing. It's one of my favorite books I've ever read, and I think in this case, maybe there were too many cooks in the kitchen. I don't know, but boy, I think so far it's a missed opportunity. What do you guys think? I'd be very curious if any of you are Stand fans, what you do think of The Stand. And again, maybe you can read it, and tell me what you believe. I don't know. I'm always curious to hear, especially when people have never read or seen something and they come to it for the first time, and their opinions matter to me because I always, you always put them up against yourself. But yeah, I'm very curious, very curious. Let me dive in and see. I've got a lot of letters still, so I'll take a look at what you have to say. This one comes from AJ Kelly, King of the Wicker People. Well, hello, Rob, and the PGS community at large. I hope everyone is quite alive and well. This little thought of mine is just something which has been swimming around in my brain for a little while, but it surfaced again during a little bit of a spirited debate, not an argument, on Twitter a little earlier on. You may have even been tagged in the tweet, I can't remember. I am a long-time lurker, going back ages. I just never had the time and nor the wherewithal to write in on a subject. However, with today's environment being what it is, I feel like this subject is at least a bit apropos. While there have always existed fandoms, Trek versus Star Wars, DC versus Marvel, and one time I even accidentally wandered into a Mr. Brooks versus Dexter message board war on IMDb, I enlisted squarely into the Mr. Brooks camp on that fateful day. However, these days, more and more people seem to be joining forces in online campaigns in support of Warner Brothers, Disney, and the like. While I do get a little bit of a kick out of watching the discourse unfold, as an active musician punk rocker, I really find myself hard-pressed to lend support toward any giant, opaque corporation in general. I'm just some dude who enjoys the MCU for its connective tissue. I got a big kick out of Zack Snyder's insane and kind of metal take on the DC characters. You're so right about that. His take on the DC characters is totally metal. I dig The Mandalorian, and The Next Generation is probably one of my favorite non-music things ever. However, many of my favorite films have been quirky and strange pseudo-indie films. Which brings me to Fox. Out of all the studio fighting that occurs, one thing that bums me out by its very absence is the lack of focus on one of the major transgressions of the last several decades. That being that the U.S. Department of Justice allowed Disney to absorb and subsequently dismantle 20th Century Fox. This, in my view, is more damaging to creative outlets than Warner Brothers pulling shenanigans with HBO Max, Disney pulling a questionable audible with Disney Plus, as well as Peacock stashing everything of value behind their goddamn ridiculous paywall. In a favorite of mine, 1999 interview, Michael Crichton, wearing a rad turtleneck and channeling his inner Nostradamus, prophetically called each and everything that we are currently living, God love him, including YouTube, TikTok, 2 or 3 companies running everything, as well as the onslaught of a global pandemic. God damn, do I miss that dude. The fact that 20th Century Fox no longer exists is an example of corporate anarchy run amok and gone woefully awry. In my wildest dreams, I could not imagine a parent company like Disney greenlighting anything, the likes of Deadpool, X-Men 2000, Logan, Alien, as well as the myriad of standalone insane movies that they made over the years, Fight Club. Also, let me mention that 20th Century Fox probably has the coolest fanfare ever, and I die on that hill. You and me both will be there bleeding to death, crashing out as we talk about how great the logo is. Even though one of my band's YouTube videos of a song that I wrote was copyright stricken because we put a flippantly funny version of 20th's fanfare before one of our uploads. When Disney consumed Fox and subsequently shat its soul out of a corporate tailpipe, I couldn't help but feel that something had been lost. I can hardly see Disney making a crazy movie about Freddie Mercury or putting one of my band's insane songs on a soundtrack. Fox did both in the post-2020 climate. At the end of the day, I just enjoy good output. I don't care what corporate entity creates it. However, I feel like it's better if more people are creating content rather than fewer. But that's just me. Cheers, all AJ. What a great letter. I agree with you. I dreamed of making a movie with the 20th Century Fox fanfare in front of it. Luckily, it's still around, so maybe I can get my wish. But I'm going to miss 20th Century Fox. I was a big fan of their output. And, Disney, first and foremost, will always think of their brand. And Disney's brand is family entertainment. You're not going to see, I can't imagine Disney greenlighting a movie like Fight Club and or Alien. I mean, they'll make Alien as a PG family-friendly film when the psychosexual nature of H.R. Giger's original conception of the creature is going to be gone. They're not going to lean into any of that. And that's just because that's what Disney's image is. But I agree with you. I like your letter a lot, and I think it's a bummer. I do think it's a bummer. This next letter comes from Danny Boy. Hello, Danny Boy. Greetings, Rob, and the Post Geek Singularity. I have a couple of topics I wish to convey, hence this may be a long letter. The first is about my thoughts on the current HBO Max situation, which are somewhat mixed. Yes, streaming seems to be becoming more and more prominent as the future of entertainment, and if the pandemic hadn't struck the world, then I could see movie theaters be slowly phased out in a way that it would not be such a slap in their faces, but I don't need to tell you what this year has caused to so many industries, let alone the entertainment one. I agree. So AT&T and Warner Brothers have fast-tracked their plans. Obviously reading between their media hype, not because of the pandemic, but to grow HBO Max so it will become as big as Disney Plus, which in itself has dropped a huge bombshell with its huge launch of new content. I personally think Disney has pushed the boat out too far on that one, but that's a topic for another time. Like yourself and others, such as John Campea, I thought AT&T and Warner Brothers had the common sense to research all the legal issues and let all parties concerned know what their plans were. But that wasn't the case. To be honest, when it was discovered that they hadn't, I wasn't all that surprised. I thought it was typical that the corporate giants think they're so powerful that they can do what they want, get away with it, and fuck everyone else. Okay, I may have watched the original RoboCop and Alien too many times to come to that conclusion, laugh out loud. Still, regardless of the entire media backlash, do you think they'll get away with what they're doing? I do. Because eventually the people that are look, we're in a transitional period of time. What Warner Brothers did was the inevitable was coming. Maybe it was going to take 5 years. Maybe it was going to take 10 years. This was inevitable. It was. And what was going to happen was once the streamers, got bigger and bigger and bigger, talent themselves loves to work for streamers because the pressure is off. You don't have to perform at the box office. So eventually, everybody would be making these movies and they would remove the pressure of the box office. So I'm not one of these iconoclasts that's being like, no, I love the movie-going experience. But I also know that eventually it's going to go away in favor of streaming. It just is going to go away. Now, there might always be movie theaters around, but they're only going to play, maybe there'll be revival houses or something, and they'll live on. But first-run movie-going was always destined, as much as I would love to see it stick around, it was always destined to go away. What this Warner Brothers deal has done is speed up that process. So, for good or worse. And they just did it badly. But you know what? We'll know by the end of the year, by the end of 2021, I think, will people be eager to go back to the movie theaters? I don't know. We'll have to see. I would imagine it's going to go away. I thought it was typical, I'm going back to the letter, that the corporate giants think they're so powerful that they can do what they want and get away with it and fuck everyone else. Okay, I may have watched the original RoboCop and Alien too many times. Regardless of the entire media backlash, do you think they will get away with it? And what are they doing, Rob? I did watch your Robservations 537 or 573 stream regarding your inside source, which was insightful. But I personally think that AT&T and Warner Brothers will get away with this Because if the theaters boycott their movies, then they won't care since those movies will be treated as loss leaders. So what does it matter if the movies are not shown on the big screen? That's exactly right. The theaters will just be shooting themselves in their feet for losing more money. The sad thing is that the theaters are damned if they do comply with AT&T and Warner Brothers plans, or damned if they don't. I know that you're a theater-going enthusiast, Rob, so I understand this is like a big kick in the kahunas for you, or cojones. But I'm not such an enthusiast, so please don't be mad at me. I won't be. As I told you, it's an inevitability. Most people aren't. If it doesn't bother me whether movies are streamed or shown in theaters, I know, it doesn't bother me. I honestly have only seen 9 movies in theaters over the last 20 years. Oh my God. Which consisted of Star Trek Nemesis. Yes, I was one of the few who went to see it. The 3 Kelvin movies. I have since regretted doing that. The first 4 DCEU movies I gave up after the Justice League debacle. And Star Wars The Force Awakens, which I did like, apart from what was done to my favorite character, Han Solo. This made me lose interest in the other 2 Star Wars sequels, which has since become a blessing in disguise. And just to add salt to the wound, it was just as bad in the 90s as I only watched 3 Star Trek movies. It was totally different in the 80s, as I was seeing 1 or 2 movies per week on average, but in the 90s, it wasn't that I lost interest in theaters per se. It was an annoying little thing called life that got in the way. I was working up to 12 to 15-hour shifts each day. The money was good back then. And at the end of each shift, before I'd go home, I went to my local pub to unwind. Hence, my interests gradually changed to social activities with friends involving pub sports, nightclubs, the occasional fraternization with a member of the opposite sex, and more importantly, beer. I still like movies, especially sci-fi and horror, and even better with both genres combined, but I was happy buying physical media or watching them on satellite TV back in the day and currently on streaming platforms. The only thing that would entice me back to the movie theater now would be a movie from one of my favorite franchises, such as Zack Snyder's Justice League or a Star Trek, but it will have to be proper Star Trek and not J.J. Abrams or Kurtzman crap. My gripe with AT&T and Warner Brothers is that they're doing all this stuff mainly for HBO Max in the U.S. only. I know they've got some deals in place for streaming services internationally, but in the UK, the only way I can get it is through Sky, the satellite TV service, which I no longer have. The reason for that is Sky was ripping me off for years, and I'd had more than a gutful of it. I was watching the same stuff over and over again, and that's when it actually worked. If there was a heavy rain or other bad atmospherics, the signal was lost, and with the UK's topsy-turvy weather, it was more often than not. This pushed me to 2 available streaming services, Amazon Prime and Netflix, via my Amazon Fire Stick, of which both combined is cheaper still than Sky. Their streaming quality is reliable, plus I can deactivate and reactivate my membership whenever I want. Sky usually tries to con you into another 12 or 24 fixed contract. I'm not willing to go through that just to get HBO Max, which will obviously be more expensive on top. Since I've got a Fire Stick and HBO Max has become available for it, I thought I was in luck. Wrong. It's only available for the US version. So I tried the VPN route, which I finally gave full access to HBO Max's website, but guess what? It won't accept non-US bankers cards or credit cards. Is it me, or is AT&T and WB just not content with pissing off Hollywood, but is determined to piss off a potentially huge customer base as well? No, I think they are. I admit that I've been going through all this hassle because of my love for Superman and the DCEU. Hence, I'm really itching to watch Zack Snyder's Justice League. Also, I'm curious about all the hype around Wonder Woman 84, possibly Godzilla vs. Kong and Dune, of which I'm a fan of the 1984 original. I did see it in the theater at the time. I know Wonder Woman is supposed to be coming to the theater as well, but where I live, the local cineplexes are shut down because of the restrictions. So that's no help to me with any of the aforementioned movies. The other option is physical media, and as I've said before, I'm happy to buy, but that's also dying off. Hence, I don't know if any of the movies or shows will get released. By the way, I recently purchased the limited edition 4K box sets of Total Recall, the original 1990 version, and the 1988 anime Akira, and the 1990 classic Tremors. Awesome. My only other opinion is, to coin a phrase, ho ho ho, a surfing we will go to get that fine sparkling booty by surfing on the cyber seas. Arg me hearties. Actually, I should have said it. Yo ho ho, a surfing we will go. I don't know if this, I can't say it. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people will be going down that route, whether they usually do or not, and I admit that if I've run out of legal options, so will I. Now for the second topic, and this is a lighter one, I really enjoyed yours and Az's Hot Toys stream on his YouTube channel, and I can't wait for part 2 this week on your channel. Being a Hot Toys fan myself, I've been slowly growing my collection for a while, and I posted on last week's stream I'm making monthly payments for the 42-inch Henry Cavill Black Suit Superman Black Suit Edition. At around $2,000, it'll be my most expensive piece to my collection, and that's not including the UK import fees that I'm dreading. Going by what Az said about his 4-foot Azrael Batman, I think that's what he said, the import fees were over $500. That's what he did say. This brings me to what I want to ask, which is, can you or Az recommend a good quality display cabinets or shelves to store my Hot Toys? Even though the majority of them are 1/6 scale, I'm not keen on opening shelves like I see on your streams, mainly because of fearing they can fall off and break. Plus, they'll have to be dusted regularly. You know what? I agree. Glass shelves are the way to go. Although this Swiffer I have is a magic item. This is why I want to make sure that they're safe, have decent lighting, and not have to dust them on a too regular basis. I hate dusting. Funny enough, my partner does. Hence, we have an agreement where she does the housework and I do the cooking, even though I help her with a lot of the heavy lifting due to her disabilities. That's why I still worry if she might accidentally drop one of the Hot Toys. A good assumption to make, and you should. Obviously, the Black Suit Superman being nearly 4 feet tall will be the challenge, but I'm willing to have a custom display unit made for that one if pre-built is not available. In my collection, there are several versions of Superman, including those that come with the Man of Steel Blu-ray Ultimate Collector's Edition and the Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition Blu-ray Ultimate Collector's Edition. As you can probably tell, I'm a fan of Superman, but I do like some of the other characters, especially in the DCEU. I have Wonder Woman as an individual hot toy, also from Wonder Woman Blu-ray's Ultimate Collector's Edition and Batman v Superman Blu-ray's Ultimate Collector's Edition, bought separate to the Superman movies. This is also the same for Batman in his regular suit and his armored suit, both bought as separate Batman v Superman Blu-ray Ultimate Collector's Editions. Yep, I got several spare copies of Batman v Superman Blu-rays and 2 copies of Suicide Squad's Ultimate Collector's Edition, since Deadshot came with one and Harley Quinn came with the other. The last Ultimate Collector's Edition Blu-ray I have is Aquaman, and Warner Brothers never did any for Shazam or the original Justice League Blu-rays. It would have been good to get the Flash and Cyborg to the complete set, other than the individual hot toy versions, which will be my next purchases after I receive my Black Suit Superman. Back to my point, any advice about displays that you or Az can give will be greatly and fully appreciated. Live long and prosper, Rob, or, as you and Az often say, be seeing you. Yes. I'm telling you, display cases are tough. I mean, IKEA display cases, they make display cases that are good, but I'll tell you, one of my favorite YouTubers, and I'm going to find him, Justin's Collection. Justin's Collection is his channel. And would you believe it's presided over by somebody named Justin? And Justin has a great... Every couple of months, he does a collection video where he shows all of his stuff that he has been collecting. And in his videos, let's say I'm just going to go to one, he has a link usually to shelf reviews. Scale Network, let's see. No, I guess he doesn't have it on here, but on his collection videos, I think he probably says it. I'll see if I can find one of his videos of his actual collections, because maybe that's where he has the name of the shelves that he uses, because I really like his shelves. My collection. So here we go. Let's see if he put it in his display. Order your figures below. Oh, let's see. Shop Fittings Direct. Now, this is an Australian company, and these are where... I'll put this in the live chat if you're watching this. This is where he gets his display cases from. Now, I don't know if they ship around the world, to be honest. If they do, they're pretty expensive, but I really like his shelves. And there's always people. It really depends what your shelf preference is and where they're going. I got these 3 shelves like 15 years ago, and they're pretty big, and they're hexagonal, and they kind of make a C shape, and you can adjust the shelves, and they're not big enough for all my figures, but I do like them. You really just have to find something that you have to find where you're going to put them, and and there's so many different display ideas, and you want to be able to put lights and things in them. So it's really up to you, but it's always nice to be looking at different options. So, yeah. I think that's you might find something when you're looking. If you don't want to buy something from Australia, you'll find what you're kind of looking for there, I think. Yeah, so Throg writes in and says, "Hello, have you seen my baseball? Thank you. Have a good night. Sincerely, Old Mother Hubbard Throg. P.S. Never mind about the baseball. Never mind. My friend Dong Woganowski found it. Thanks. Well, you tell Don thanks for me. I appreciate that. So, okay, let's see what you guys are saying. I have no idea. Let's jump over there and find out what's going on. Wow, there's a lot of you are writing in here. Let's see, these are all from yesterday. Star Wars Rocks says, "Hi, Rob. I sent you a letter recently, and I'm wondering if you've read it yet. I have not read it yet, I don't think, but that doesn't mean I don't have it." Willow sends in a tip, and she says, "To be clear, Tozanamaran, the approved COVID vaccine, was developed in Germany by BioNTech, a company founded by Turkish-German scientists Ugur Sarin and Özlem Türeci. Pfizer, which oversaw manufacture and distribution, specifically declined funding from Warp Speed in order to allow the scientists to focus on doing research rather than making progress reports. Warp Speed has little to do with the vaccine's creation, but is involved in its subsequent production and distribution in the U.S. Well, thank you for that, Willow. I didn't know. I didn't know that, but it's good to know that. Yeah, I mean, I knew that Pfizer wasn't a part of Warp Speed, so it's good to hear that explanation. Willow goes on to say, "What did you make of Tom Cruise's infamous couch jumping incident? I personally never really understood why it garnered so much controversy. I think for two reasons. I think it was out of character, one, and two, it was just really goofy. I mean, I thought it was goofy fun. He's in love with Katie Holmes, and it was goofy fun. He jumped. So people... again, people like to impose their ideas of somebody on all of their behavior. So a lot of people don't understand why Tom Cruise is a Scientologist, and then they see all this bad information about Scientology and hear only bad things. So it all works together in tandem to create this image of Tom Cruise as a crazy person, which I don't think is necessarily fair. But what can you do? Loki's Mornings of Mischief says, "What in the heck happened? What did I just watch? Why did they do it like this? I'm asking so many questions. It's because I want answers. I assume you mean The Stand." I don't know. Like, I don't know why you're presented a platter of how to do something. It's right there. Go do that thing. And then, oh no, cooler heads prevail. But I think that flashback structure is something that wasn't written that way. I could be wrong. I'm sure I'm going to find out. Someone's going to tell me. But we will know. Yeah. But I'm with you. Stubble McShave says, "Do you think they cut a lot out of the pandemic material because they were afraid of backlash? Probably. They could have left a lot of holes in the story, hence the need for restructuring it to hide those holes. I'm shining the best light on it, and I may be mistaken. I don't know. It just seemed like maybe they got cold feet and they had to cut it short. But you're making The Stand, and I can't believe the original Stand miniseries was only 4 90-minute episodes, and this is however many episodes, and it feels long, especially because it doesn't seem like they have. What are they going to add to the narrative? I mean, they're adding to the parts that we don't need, and they're not going back to the original negative as sacrosanct, which is strange to me. It's also strange that Stephen King isn't talking about it much, and it's weird. I don't understand. Jamie Cruz sends in a tip and says, "Won't be paying for CBS's The Stand. Time to listen to the audiobook. Rolling Stone didn't care for it either. It's so disappointing. So-called writers can't get adaptations right anymore. What a bummer. What a bummer indeed." It's just... Holly Jolly Polly says, let's see if I understand this correctly. CBS has not produced quality product. Again, Star Trek Discovery, Picard, Twilight Zone. I'm shocked. Shocked, I tell you. Really, are you surprised, Rob? You shouldn't be. Some of you told us this would happen, and I'm on record. Well, Hope Springs Eternal. It's not necessarily CBS, but clearly this, it smacked of CBS notes. So it's totally a bummer. Sends in a super chat and says, hi, Rob. They didn't have to use the Blue Oyster Cult song, but why avoid tunes in a story that use music to set tone? The casual attitude of the plague in this series was deliberate as not wearing a mask. I agree. It's like they just kept cutting and like, oh, it's a week, and oh, it's 2 weeks, or oh, it was very strange. That's why I want to hear. I want to read a book about, or an article about the making of The Stand. 1701D sends in a super chat and says, let's say there's someone out there who may or may not have read the Strange New World script. Does this potential someone can tell us if the writing is any good? I would say it's reasonably the same. Not that I've read that script, but if I had, I would say it's reasonably the same. But again, I don't know. It's just, it is what it is. And Eric Gant sends in a tip and says, just a heads up, Jeremy Bulloch, oh, that's right, I forgot to talk about the OG Boba Fett passed away today. I can't wait till we can kiss this year goodbye. I know. 12 a.m. New Year's Eve, I'll throw on the Ramones and sing 2020, 24 hours to go. That's very funny. You're absolutely right. But, yeah. Strange New Worlds, it's hard to tell. We'll see. I just am not convinced that the people working on the show know how to write science fiction, or have clearly they don't have a science fiction background in terms of their writing, so it's really glaring. Eric Gant says, just a heads up, Jeremy Bulloch, the OG. Yeah, I didn't say anything. Wait, I read that, but I guess I skipped over the other one. Yeah, so what I was going to say about Jeremy Bulloch, I loved Empire Strikes Back. And you know that Jeremy Bulloch, it's not his voice, and Jeremy Bulloch's in the Boba Fett suit, but even in like Jedi, when the way he just bows his head and things like that over to Bausch, it's just like, the nod. I thought he was great. He gave, what other character that really only said things like, he's worth a lot to me? How can a character like that get into the public consciousness the way Boba Fett did? It was a combination of his movements, his mystery, and his badass costume. And I think that, it cannot be underestimated. I'm getting the hiccups. How good he was in that role. He was great in that role. The way he held a gun, the way he moved, the way he stepped out from behind Vader. It's great. Great stuff. Ret1, is that Retcon1, sent in a super chat and said, it's CBS All Access. Of course it's crap. The surprise would be if it was good. I'm surprised that Mr. King would let this pass. Well, I think he sold this off a long time ago. Warner Brothers has been trying to make this forever. I think Warner Brothers made it, but they were, and I'm surprised. What can you do? But I'm not surprised that it was CBS All Access and they didn't know what to do with it. Not surprised at all. Well, ladies and gentlemen, kind beings, kind folks from across the 28 known galaxies, have to cut this one a little short today. More work is involved. I want to thank you for being here. Thanks for listening to me prattle on. I'll be back on the John Campy Show tomorrow and have more shows. I'm trying to get Let's Get Physical Media done. I've had a computer issue that I'm in the process of solving, even as I talk to you right now. So I've been sort of not available to edit over the last couple days, which I'm going to alleviate. But anyway, I hope to get that up for you and a number of other things that I have to deliver. So that's exciting. But anyway, I want to thank you for all the support in the channel, whether it's via super chats or letters. Our website is down until tonight. So if you've tried to send a letter, just maintenance, changing things around, please continue to do so. There's going to be more film festival movies dropping tonight. And as I said, I watched a really good one that that's going to be up Friday at 9:00 at night, our time, I think it's called There's Something in the Silence. You guys are going to want to watch that. It worked for me. I literally jumped. I jumped from one of our films. It was good. I liked it. Very well, very clever. Very well done. So check those out. I want to thank our moderating staff. I want to thank, hey, Purple Valkyrie's here. Hello, Purple Valkyrie. How are you? I want to thank Joshua Levesque. I want to thank the Richard. Greg Smith is here hanging out. I feel very, very bad for Greg Smith. I think we all, nobody could bow their head like Jeremy Bulloch in the Boba Fett costume. It was the nod, the Jedi nod, and just the way he walked and moved in Empire. But Greg Smith, our moderator, has a beautiful Boba Fett suit, and to find out that he's going to have to repaint that suit the same week that the actual Jeremy Bulloch dies, it can only be a complete blow to him. But we haven't talked about it, so I haven't. But he's in the chat, so thank you for that. Thank you to all the moderators for being as good as you are. And on that note, I'm just going to say the last thing, which is every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And if you do have CBS All Access, I watch these things through Amazon, so check them out. I want to hear what you think of The Stand, especially if you haven't yet read it and the miniseries is your first exposure to the story. Please write in and tell me what you think. I want to know. And and everyone's asking about the short story. I have to have the short story competition rules up, which I'm going to have shortly as well. So anyway, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for being a part of Robservations. This was episode 578 on the March to 600. Eventually, all of these will be up as podcasts. I'm trying to get up on. I'm on Apple Podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio, I believe now, and Spotify. So if you want podcasts, check that out. And that's about it. So I will see you all later. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to everybody, have a better day.